Good evening, everyone, and again, thanks for hosting me and having me here. I'm excited to tell you this story, and this story encompasses a large part of my career. So it's not just the story of a discovery that we had in 2019, but it's the story of sort of the evolution of my own understanding and navigating the world of collecting fine minerals and crystals from all over the world. And so what happened was I started going to shows, and this is the region where it is in the Karakoram Mountains, and I started seeing crystals of beautiful aquamarines. And at the time, probably in the mid-90s, you would see an aquamarine crystal that was maybe just a few centimeters, mostly always single crystals, and they would have like sometimes frosted faces, sometimes they'd be glassy, sometimes they'd be gem clear, sometimes they'd have great color, and we were all awestruck by these crystals, never imagining what was yet to come and what would come in the future. And so as I started to see these things coming in and sort of escalating in size and quality and diversity and combinations, I started to think, like, where are these things coming from, and who's curating the extraction, who's working on getting these things out and bringing them to market. And then, of course, you meet all the dealers from the region that come to the shows internationally, and you get to know them and you start to ask them questions. And so there was a bunch of people that were traveling there and bringing things back. Herb Aboda was one of the people who went to this region, I don't know, probably 100 times in his career and brought back beautiful things. And so did not Wayne Thompson. He didn't go there as much. He went once or twice, but he had a very strong connection with a guy named Tahir Iqbal, who also brought out a lot of material from this location. And so you could see coming in the market every year, new and different combinations escalating in quality. And so what I started to think about is like, well, what is happening at this place, and how could we improve the chances of getting things out of the ground? So this is where it is. This is the Shigar region of northern Pakistan. You can see it's bound by 3 massive countries. That's where the mine is, the Biansapa Pass, which is in Shigar, and that's where the mine Gon is. And so that's the location where the King of Kashmir was extracted. And honestly, the King of Kashmir is a misnomer. This is technically in Kashmir, but it's really more in the Karakoram Mountains. But the group that purchased the piece, which bequeathed it to the Houston Museum of Natural Science, got to choose the name. And so they thought the King of Kashmir sounded better than the King of the Karakoram Mountains. So this was the first thing that brought me to Pakistan, and that is not an aquamarine. That tourmaline was part of a very historic discovery from the Paprock region in, I think, 1995. And that's what preempted my first visit to the region. And I went there and purchased a group of specimens on my first trip. And then I started making regular trips to the region all the way through into around 2000, 2001. And this tourmaline is now in Steve Smale's collection. It's a fabulous object. And then one day, I think this is Tucson show circa 2000. And Joe Fryic was the collector du jour, and I think a lot of you know who Dave Wilbur is. And he had a display of these 2 cases that were on the floor at the TGMS. And for any of you who were there and lucky enough to see these displays, David helped him curate an amazing mineral collection. Beautiful things from all over the world. And the cases were back to back. So if you stood on this side, you weren't looking at the other case. You had to walk around the other side. And so on the other side, unfortunately, I didn't have a photo of it, is a single aquamarine crystal that we call the Fryic Aqua. And it came from Herb Aboda. He brought it back, and it was singularly the most well-formed geometric aquamarine that I'd ever seen in my life. And it was about 6 inches tall, totally optical, and it was larger than 5 centimeters. It was about 5 centimeters in diameter. Glassy luster, water clear. And I saw it, and my mouth dropped open. It was the middle of the show, And I was standing there with Joe and Dave, and I asked Joe, I said, you know, one day, is it possible if I come back? Because he further, a fellow East Coaster, I was like, if I come to your place, would I be able to hold it? And he looked at me and he goes, wait. And he went and got the police officer who was there. They got the keys. They opened it up right on the floor, and everybody was like gathering around. He put it in my hands, and I'm holding this crystal, and I was just like, oh my God, this is like, it was just like holding something otherworldly. It was so amazing, and it's a memory that will stick with me for the rest of my life. And that also created the momentum to try and find more of these. And so it almost became like a thing in the group that I sort of, my cohorts, that like we'd be like, what are you doing? And I'd be like, oh, I don't know, I'm looking around for minerals. I'm looking for the Fryic Aqua on matrix. This became like a thing that we talked about. Like, is it Fryic Aqua? Is it that good? It became a standard in this little like clique. And there it is, that's the Fryic Aqua. I wound up, Herb wound up getting it back through a strange series of events, and then I actually bought it from Herb, and I owned it for a period of time, and then I sold it at some point to a collector. It's a fabulous object. The geometry is just startling. And then started to come, this is the evolution, it started to change, and you started to see aquamarines of incredible quality on matrices, and so those didn't exist before. This crystal here is probably about 7 inches tall. This one is probably 8. And if you see these in person, they're much different than you imagine in a 2D image. They're the three-dimensionality, the color, the transparency, they're just incredible objects. This one we still own. It's in the Fine Minerals collection. This one is in Barry Kitt's collection. And so there was sort of a transfer of the guard. Herb Aboda was slowing down. And was no longer working with his connections in Pakistan. One of my best friends, Marco Amabili, who's a professor of engineering, also loves minerals, and his, you know, one of his favorite species is aquamarine, only second to garnet. And Marco and I, you know, have worked together for the last, I don't know, 25 years. And he just helps me and works helping me around the world secure great minerals because he just loves it. He's not paid for it. He's well paid for his academic work, and he's one of the most celebrated scientists in the world. And he's been poached by China, and he's living there right now for the next 4 years. But he and I worked on the Pakistan project distinctly. And so when Herb sort of transitioned, he connected us, because Herb and I were good friends, with his source, a guy named Muzaffar Ali. And he's still the person that I work with today. I'm actually going to be seeing him in less than 72 hours, because I'm flying from here to Pakistan tomorrow. And because this is the season. I can explain what that is after. So when we started working with Muzaffar, we were like, hey, what can we do to get these things on matrix? What can we do to help you solve the problem? Because we only see happenstance crystals that might be on a small piece of matrix. And both of these are repaired. This is repaired here, and this is repaired here. Not that that's a real big downside, because repaired specimens and restored specimens are, you know, just totally accepted now in today's collecting community. But, you know, if you could get them unrepaired, or if you could get them in groups, or if you could get them on bigger plates, it would be beneficial. So following Collector's Edge and Brian Lee's and his work and their use of diamond chainsaws sort of inspired us to use diamond chainsaws here. And so we bought a bunch of diamond chainsaws, and we sent them to Pakistan to try and get them to use them in their discoveries. This is me and Marco at a display that we did in Tucson. I was a much younger man, and unfortunately there's no aquamarines in there, but that's who Marco is. He's a great guy, and this was his personal heliodor. He also loved heliodors, and those are 3 of the best Ukraine heliodors that are out there. This is called the Pearl Tanzanite. That's a very famous piece. This is amethyst from Jackson's Crossroads, and that's also bicolor steel, which is the finest tourmaline to ever have been found from the Pedionera mine. And this was the first piece that I purchased from Muzaffar Ali in Tucson. And this crystal is about 8 inches tall. It's very opaque. It has one repair here, and it's on a larger matrix. And so this started to inspire us, like we could find something new. We could find something that the world hasn't seen before. Incredible aquamarines on matrix with gem quality. And so we started to push Muzaffar and pushed him to start to use diamond chainsaws in the discoveries. And we gave them the diamond chainsaws. They sat there for over 7 years. They didn't use them. They got rusted, they got destroyed, we had to send new ones. We did that wash, rinse, and repeat probably 5 or 6 times, and then they finally used them on this particular pocket that was discovered during the 2018 season. And that was also a historic pocket of aquamarine because it was associated with muscovite and garnets. And the combination was incredible. The color combination is just, it's a historic pocket. And they didn't use it in the extraction. They got out some large pieces and recognized that they had too much overburden and they couldn't move them down the mountain. So they said, well, why don't we get one of those saws that are here and see if it works? And that changed everything. Once they were able to use the saw, they started to see its advantages, and they cut up the pieces from that pocket, they moved them down the mountain, and they were prepared to use them the next season, which would be the season, ironically, of the King of Kashmir. This is one of the pieces that came from that garnet pocket. This is at the MIM. We sold this to Salim Adi. That piece is about 2.5 feet wide and about 1.25 feet tall in the back. This is another one that's fabulous. This combination of the blue crystals together with the white feldspars and the garnets is just outstanding. These are 2 more. This one we called the Waterfall. And this one didn't have a name, but it's, again, that crystal is probably in the neighborhood of 7 inches. And on matrix, it's just outstanding material. And so after this pocket, we were able to convince them to use the saws. And so they were prepared to use them in the 2019 season. And the trick was, the chances that everything lined up for the specimen that you're going to see to occur are so serendipitous, it's not even funny. I mean, all the moons and stars aligned for a moment in time, and there's one moment that created it or could have totally destroyed it. So this is the area. That's where all the mining work is done. That's the Gone Mountain. That's the suspension bridge that you use to cross it. Like I said, I'll be at that spot in 80 hours. And this is a bit of the geology there. So these are all horizontal pegmatites for the most part that are cross-cutting the host rock. Those pegs range anywhere from 1 meter thick to probably 5 or 6 meters, and they go straight across the other side of the mountain range. And there's tons in the area. This is not the only mining area, but this is a very heavily mined area by the community, and they have been very successful. There's usually at least 1 or 2 important discoveries found at this mountain every year, and that's what I'm hoping to find in this coming week, is to see what happens. Because when they work in the upper areas, they can't work there all season because it's a very inhospitable environment. It gets cold, it's already cold there, there's snow all over the mountains. This you're looking at peak season, so this is probably in, I think, late August, early September. And that's where the piece was discovered, in that one hole right there. That's where the King of Kashmir came from. Yes?
What's the height of that off the ground?
That's about, I think about 700 meters straight up. And to get there, you got to climb. There's no elevator, unfortunately. And I'll tell you a funny story about that in a second. Just remind me, the guy with the flip-flops and the cell phone. It's very funny. Every one of these little red marks marks a particular tunnel that belongs to a particular group of people. So there's 3 men that own this mountain range, technically, and they have a percentage in everything that gets produced every year. Then there's the group that actually mines the area. They have a larger percentage. And then there's the person who gives the dynamite and the person who supplies the compressor. And they all get shares. And any particular one of these has anywhere from 6 to 12 shares. And so it's like a community sort of engagement. And for every one that's productive every year, there's 100 they don't find anything. So they go up, they spend their money, they spend their time, they risk their lives, they go in and they mine, and they don't find anything. And so this is, documenting this is important for me because, people go to mineral shows and they see displays and they see crystals on display, and they really don't know what it takes to get those things there and all the stages behind it that have had to fall into place to allow them to be there. And we are lucky enough to go in and purchase those and enjoy them. But, the efforts that have led up to it and the serendipitous act of, discovering it it's sometimes unfathomable. This is actually, and now we're zoomed in from the ground looking up, and you can see how big a person is. And that's the headquarters. So that's where they would sleep and hang out every night. This is the actual portal to the mine and where the piece came from, and that goes in another 80 meters straight into the face where they discovered the piece. And then this is the bathroom. And so you basically, you don't come down. You go up in the beginning of the season and you stay up. And there are some runners that bring supplies up every couple of days. They have a winch system, and they have guys on the ground that will pull, and they sit there and they heave, and they can pull up equipment and things like that. And you get your replenishment of food, water, cell phone chargers, and stuff like that, all to be brought up during the season, and that's where they work. It's a treacherous area, I have to say. I have not personally been up that high. I've climbed up about halfway, and then I started looking down, and I was like, okay, it's time for me to go back down. But these guys, for them, this is like going to the supermarket. You can see this is what it's like. I mean, that's straight down. This is climbing up and pulling yourself up. It's quite vertical. They don't really have safety ropes. The person who we put in place, a gentleman named Marco Lorenzoni, who worked together with MCP and together with Fine Minerals International, and myself and Marco Amabili, he's the one who went there to extract this piece and teach them. And he said to me, he's like, every time I went to the bathroom, they'd all look. And they'd watch him go and make the climb over because they were waiting to see if he was going to fall because there's no ropes. And he was like, I don't know why they were watching. It was crazy. It was such a bizarre comment to hear. Here you can see there's that group of guys, and they'll pull up a generator. And then, so they stand on the rock here, they load it here, they pull up here, and then there's a group waiting to receive it up there. And this was the photo, that was the first photo that I had ever seen of the piece. So we got the call, and the moment that was that quintessential, that pinnacle moment was that there was a miner, he was working in the tunnel, and they opened up the pocket and they saw this. And at that moment, he took pause. Had he not, this would never exist. Had he and they decided to work on this and extract it, they would have destroyed it entirely. It would have never existed as a specimen. They didn't have the ability to extract it. And that was the driver for them to contact us and say, hey, we've got something special. We want to sell it to you in the mountain. And I said, oh, okay. I was like, well, do I get to see it? Or no, you can't see it. I was like, well, how can I buy something in the mountain I can't see? They're like, trust us, it's great. And this is the top of the pocket, and there was a number of crystals that were already loose that had come off the top, 4 or 5, through geologic movement over millions of years. And they had broken out from their base and recrystallized on both sides. And so those crystals were recovered and brought down. And so I could at least see some photos and videos of some single crystals, 1 or 2 that went back to the piece, and 4 or 5 that were from this pocket. And I understood the quality. And I could see the quality had brilliant luster, it had extremely saturated color, big size, and I wouldn't say flawless, not like the Fryic Aqua, but it was extremely transparent. I would say like 70% transparent or translucent. And so we said, okay, well, we got to get a photo. We got to see. I cannot buy something I cannot even see. So we called Marco. He was available. I sent him down there. He had just recently, like 6 months before, fallen in another mine in Italy and hooked himself on a ladder and was dangling and totally screwed up his shoulder. So he was like only one-armed, and he climbed that with one arm, pulling himself up, which is stupendous. He gets up there, that's his helmet, he puts it in, they let him take one photo. This is at about 3 a.m., and he comes back down, and they wouldn't let him take any more photos, they wouldn't let him make measurements, they were just like, okay, now we're going back down. So he goes back down, he sends us this photo. And they're like, okay, now we want to negotiate. And I'm like, okay. I was like, at this point, it's a total risk. I don't know if this is going to remain intact. I can't really tell the size. I don't know the entire quality. I just know it looks important, and it looks impactful, and it's big. And so we began negotiating. And we negotiated with, and again, remember, this is a group of people. So there's about 12 owners of this particular discovery. And so we spent the better part of 2 weeks negotiating with them, trying to come up with an agreement to own this if we were going to be the ones to take it out. After about 2 weeks, we agreed, finally, and we purchased the piece, and Marco was like a caged lion. He was pacing back and forth for these 2 weeks because he couldn't do anything. He was just sitting in Skardu waiting to go up, and he was dying to work on this project. And so finally, when he got the green light, he was like up. He spent about 30 days there in total, and probably about 25 of them up on the ridge. He never came back down until he finished. And because of that decision not to extract it, it gave us the opportunity to take the piece out in as an intact way as it could be ever done. And the work that he did was incredible. What they learned was that the best way to go in to take a pocket out is not right at the pocket. You have to create space. You have to come around from the side and create access to it. And that seems, intuitive, but it's not, because when you're there, when you're excited, you just want to work on it. And you imagine, oh, I can just go 5 centimeters above it here and start working on it. That's not going to work. You're going to destroy it. So we started getting more photos, and we started to realize, oh my God, this is going to be one of the most incredible mineral crystal specimens in the world. And in my opinion, having seen it, and of course I'm biased, for me it is the finest crystal specimen on the planet, at least at this moment. And so I felt better when I started to see these photos and started to know that this was going to turn into something more important. That's Yawar. He was Marco's right hand in helping him extract. And this is in that headquarters. So this is what it's like. This is where they sleep. This is where they wake up. This is where they cook over here. And they make, just simple foods. And that's Yawar laying under the pocket before they really started excavating the sides and exposing it. And why I say this is like a discovery of a lifetime is because, there's been several pockets since over the last 5 years. They've produced tons of aquamarines. And they've used a lot of the techniques and technology that we've taught them. And they're applying it on their own, and that's fantastic. But nothing compares to this. So that the fact that this one mining group took pause and stopped, and the quality of the aquamarine was an 11 on a scale of 1 to 10. The aesthetics of the piece was 11 on a scale of 1 to 10. The size of the piece, and then the fact that it's not repaired, or at least I'd say 90% of it are not repaired, and we got it out, it's like unobtainium. It's unheard of. There's Marco sort of scoping out his plan to remove it, making drawings. There's work going on. This is drilling. Feather and wedges, we had to hunt these down. You can't imagine. It took us a week. We had to come down and go out to quarries nearby and find feathers and wedges so that we could use them, because they didn't have them to do the extraction, to create space on the side. This is a photo that went viral. That's one of the brothers who owns the land. And that he made that photo, and I mean, you can just see, as this is happening, this is unfolding for all of us. So Marco was in Canada as a professor at McGill University at that time, Marco Amabili. Marco Lorenzoni is on site. I'm in New Jersey, MCP's back in Italy, and we're all communicating about this as this is progressing. And so at inception, it was like, oh, I didn't know I had that one photo, and as we're starting to see this, we're like, oh my God, this is something monumental. This is historic. And they went working on opening the sides. Here they've protected the crystals, and the blue paint is to delineate the outside perimeter of the piece. There's Marco under there sawing up, and you have to know that those saws require water not to burn out, and they don't have water. So you would have to pour the water on Marco and on the saw the whole time while he's cutting it. It's a nasty business. This is an easier position, and this is a point where they're getting near the end of extraction. So this little piece of wood here is a chalk. That's another chalk. Those pieces of wood going that way go in under the piece and create a framework so that when the last cut goes, the piece will fall into the foam that they put under it, and then they can pull the long pieces of wood back, the chalks will fall, and the piece will come forward. And so all of this foam this is probably about 3 feet of strong, hard, cushioned foam that they've packed in all under the piece to make the last cut. Marco had been working there, and to his resolve, the man is he's like the Terminator. You can hit him with a 2x4 and he just keeps going. He had the drill, and he was drilling at one point, and the drill bit locked, and the handle spun. If you've ever worked with hand tools, you know what I'm talking about. Whacked him in the mouth, knocked out a tooth, and he just kept going. And he was just like, yeah, it's just part of the game. So there you can see it. So there's the specimen right there, the bottom of it, and they're going to make the last cut because they've now worked all the way around it to expose it from behind and underneath and make the cuts on the back. And at that point, they're hoping that when they make this cut, the whole thing doesn't crack or split, that it stays as a block. They're hoping they left enough room here that it's going to remain intact. And then these are the pieces of wood that I mentioned that they're going to pull forward, that these chalks fall, and then they can take the piece and get it down and then invert it. This is after they've done that, and they start to carry it forward, and they bring it to the edge of the cliff. And there's the team. This is another one of the brothers. This is Ahmad Cho, that's his son. And these are the specimens that came out. That's the King of Kashmir. This is another one of the most important specimens, and when this is done, it winds up to be just about that size. This didn't turn into anything, and really there was only 4 or 5 pieces from the pocket other than the King of Kashmir. And I'd say there was probably about 5 major crystals that went back on the King of Kashmir. So then at this point, we got it onto the landing, and we're all celebrating, and then we're like, oh shit, we got to get it down. And I'm like, okay. I was like, okay, spare no expense. Get new ropes, get new cables, set up the whole thing. Let's take a week and do it. And they were like, no, it's going to be fine. We do this all the time. And I'm just like, oh my God. I was like, why? Why can't we just indulge me? And they were like, no, no, no. And so they tied it up. And that's one of the brothers. That's Ahmad Cho. And here they go working to get it down. And at this point, we're on the telephone in Pakistan, Italy, Canada, New York, all discussing listening to Muzaffar, who's on the ground at the bottom of the hill on that mound, say, yes, come on, Allah, let's go. And then this is as it came down, and it was, this is the photo that went viral. So this photo, that's Muzaffar's father. He's about 80 years old, and he himself was a miner. And when he saw this piece, this photo just went crazy on the internet. And actually, when it went on the internet, and it started to travel on social media, the first things, there's this site called Scamologists, and they said, oh, it's a fabrication, it's actually not a real specimen, it's Photoshop and whatnot. And I immediately posted a counter post, and then I was like, oh shit, I better take that down. And I took it right back down, because I didn't want people to know, we hadn't discussed with anyone what was going on with this piece, because we really didn't know ourselves what was going on. It was an organic discovery along the way. And so with that photo, someone called me from Joel Barsh from the Houston Museum. And he said, I think you probably know about this. And I said, I could, maybe. I said, why? He goes, well, we'd like to have it. And I go, okay. He goes, where is it? And I said, it's in Italy at the moment. And he goes, let's go. And so we flew to Italy, and we looked at the piece, and he looked at it as it was being cleaned. It wasn't even completed. And he said, okay, I'm going to go back, I'm going to talk to the board, and we're going to talk about acquiring it. And ultimately, they did. Here it is in the lab as they're removing some of the extra host rock and some of the pegmatite that didn't add anything to the piece. Here it is being washed. And I'll tell you the color. You're seeing the color vary in all these slides because you can't really reproduce actual colors. You know, all our phones and different screens and different platforms showed colors differently. I will tell you the color is impressive in person. It is not washed out. There's Marco Amabili after the piece was completed at the lab in Italy. I think all the crystals are on there at this stage. No, I think there's one more that's not added at this point of their stage. And you can see these are crystals that, this crystal goes on over here. That's the other specimen that came out, one of the other important ones. That's another important specimen that came out. Those are, 6, 7 inches tall. And that's me with the piece in Tucson. And so what happened was the piece came to New Jersey, to us, after it was discovered. We then shipped it from New Jersey to Italy because we had to export it properly because Fine Minerals International purchased it, so it had to go to us. And then we shipped it to Italy to be worked on. Joel flew over and looked at it, saw it, fell in love. They acquired it, and then we shipped it to Tucson. It arrived. It was actually in my house. That's in the house in Tucson, and no one got to see it that year because we just took it there and then drove it straight to Houston before the show had even opened. And that's the other crystal that I was talking about that was not on. Those two little guys and that one, which is like at least 11-inch crystal. I mean, this piece is huge. It weighed almost 300 kg when it was extracted, and by the time it was done, it was maybe 2 and change after we removed some of the overburden. And so now this is a video that's going to tell the exact same story of what I just told you, and you can see it sort of a more tactile and sort of potent sort of experience. That's the bridge to Gone. There's the mountain range. So all the equipment that we had to send up. That's Muzaffar's boys. That's Marco climbing up with his one arm. And for people to see this and understand that that's how these crystals grow, this is how they form in nature, this video can teach so much in 4 minutes that you could never explain when you walk into a mineral show or a crystal shop. That's the fateful drill that popped him in the mouth. And like I said, this was, almost 30 days of work straight just to extract the one piece. Having a bird's eye view into a pocket like that is incredible, at least for me. So they're just pouring water on them. It's amazing. And that's the piece mostly protected there. They've got it chalked up on one side. There it is when they're about to make the last cut. And unfortunately, they hit the start video when they was going to drop, and they actually didn't start it. And so you got this video, which is sort of like right after it fell. There's the block down in the foam. There's Marco with his tooth. And there's the King of Kashmir. So this is when we're all on the phone freaking out. And we're watching this come down. And I mean, all that work, all the money, you know, if this thing falls, it's going to be obliterated. And then it went to the lab. And what's incredible, after we cleaned it and we removed all the iron staining and everything, the luster on the crystals was just phenomenal. That's about the right color right there. And that's James Elliott photographing it for us in New Jersey. And then that was Marco and I in Tucson. And then it goes on to live in Houston. And it is going to be the center of their display in their upcoming new mineral hall. So the Houston Museum of Natural Science is going to open a new mineral hall probably in 2026. I've been privy to a couple of the new plans and what they're going to do, and it's going to be, you know, if you know Houston and how they do things and what they've done in other aspects of the museum, if you look at their paleontology hall, it's like probably one of the best in the world, and their energy hall is incredible. And now they're going to redo the Cullen Gem and Mineral Hall, and this is going to be their centerpiece. So it's going to be incredible. I'm so excited for them. And so it'll be on display eventually. It's been sitting there. After we extracted it, we drove it to Houston, and Joel actually moved out of his office, had every piece of furniture in the office removed, and painted the whole room black. I mean the whole room, ceiling, floor, everything, the walls, the trim, the inside of the door, the whole thing. And they removed all the lights. We put this piece in the center of the room on a table, and we mounted just 2 spotlights above it. And this was for the people who contributed the money to buy it, and the founders and the board to come in and enjoy it for this time as sort of a, you know, a nod to their generosity and ability to make this happen for Houston. And the fact that it'll be in an American museum and that you can go visit it is really cool. And I'll tell you that when you see this in person, everyone has a very different reaction. So Herb got to see it, Herb Aboda, since he's a great friend of mine and Joel's. He came to see it with us in Houston sometime after it had been there for about a year in this room, Joel's old office. And when Herb walked in, he was just quiet, silent. He approached it and was just like, and just stood there, and he couldn't remark. It took him probably about 4 or 5 minutes to gain composure and say something because he was so awestruck. Another person who I think has a real great appreciation for minerals, and one of my very good friends, is Sandor Fuss. Sandor saw it and he just started cracking up hysterically, like instantaneous, like this can't even be real. Like what is this? I can't get over it. And so everyone's reaction's a little bit different, but one thing's for sure, when you see this in person, if you have the chance to get down to Houston once it's on display, you won't be disappointed. It is incredible. The other thing I can tell you is that, sad to say, they didn't entirely learn, and this is sort of a statement to the idea that this wouldn't exist if that one miner didn't stop and take pause. And I didn't know this until much later. So what I didn't know is that Marco was done. Marco Lorenzoni. He was done. He was beat up after taking this out. Once they got it down, he was like, I did the project. I'm done. What I didn't know is that further into the pocket, there was another specimen. A specimen with a crystal about this long, almost 12 inches tall, about that diameter, so almost 6 inches diameter, riding next to a beautiful quartz crystal by itself on a mound of albite. That specimen alone is worth a god-awful fortune. And he left it there. If I knew it was there, I would have never let him leave. I would have done anything that he needed to get him to stay there. But I didn't know. And so the same gentleman that accompanied him for 30 days extracting this was taken on by the team to go extract that after Marco left. Fast forward another 6 months, I see a crystal show up in the market that's repaired in 3 places with no matrix that looks just like this pocket. And it was in such a close time frame. And so as it gets offered to me, I'm like, wait, where is that crystal from? What is that? What is that? And they were embarrassed to tell me. They sold it out afterwards. Unfortunately, Yarwar went in with the diamond chainsaw and he put it about 5 centimeters below the piece and started to cut right under it, and the whole thing just crumbled and fell apart and became repaired, which is a horrible story. But the reality is it's a testament to how impossible it was that this happened. And I still look at it and I go through the experience and I play it over in my mind and I'm like, how did that even happen? It's almost like it's just like it's a dream and you know, I haven't seen it probably in about at least three years. I haven't seen it, maybe 4. No, 3. And I can't wait to see it again because it's one of those things that when you see it in person, it does something to you. It's magic, yeah. So that is the story of the King of Kashmir and the discovery.